Oi, oi, it's your boy, the Manal Cap of studying banal crap, Jack Slack. It's the Jack Slack podcast, and we're coming at you on the 21st of December. We're well into Christmas season-ish. On the downhill slope into Christmas, there we go. And it took me a little while to recover from watching the last UFC of the year because it wasn't great. But you weren't expecting great because it was a Sean Strickland main event. But there was some fun stuff on it. It was a interesting night of fights. It's one of those ones like, you know, I used to write these articles on Bleach Report, Bloody Elbow, Fightland, and my theme was always like, even on a bad night of fights, you can spot themes and learn things. And the theme of this card was like bad UFC boxing, or things that are stylistically part of being a quote-unquote boxer in the UFC that probably get you murked a lot sooner in actual boxing. But, you know, I'm not here to say that because it wouldn't work very well in actual boxing, it's not legit. You know, it's a different sport, and when you've got so many other considerations, it means that a lot of other things are viable. Shifting, for one, is a huge part of striking in mixed martial arts because everyone runs straight backwards. Switch hitting, not nearly as common in high-level boxing as it is in MMA, though that has changed recently not recently, but like over the last 20 years, you're seeing a lot more guys switch hit in the highest levels of boxing. You know, we've still got Bud Crawford hanging around in the top 10 of the pound for pound, and sometimes he comes out southpaw, sometimes he comes out orthodox. Or Andre Ward back in the day. It feels sad to say back in the day about Andre Ward. I still think of Joe Calzaghe as like a current guy, so that shows how done with remembering new names I am. Sip of tea. We're on Melbourne breakfast again because it's my fave, and I've got a nice mince pie lined up here for chewing and then talking derisively about women's MMA over. But this was our last UFC card of the year. More of a whimper than a bang, but there's some fun stuff on it. I think for most people, and I said this on my boycast, I said, you know, the fight I'm looking forward to is Tsarukyan versus Ismagulov. I believe neither top 10, maybe one of them was in the top 15, but, you know, if you've been watching this for a while, you haven't been able to avoid that these guys are very, very good. Part of the rankings is that it's just name value, and you've got guys who, once they're in the rankings, it's almost impossible for them to fall out. So, like, Rafael dos Anjos was ranked for years when he didn't really do much. Michael Chandler is ranked forever, even though he's always losing. And definitely doesn't want to fight any of these guys. You know, it's Tsarukyan, Ismagulov, Kutateladze, Gamrot, all these guys who are super legit, but not getting a look in with the you know, quote unquote name lightweights. Think of the trouble that Beneil Dariush has had, running up like a 7-fight winning streak or whatever it is. And Islam Makhachev before he fought for the title. And honestly, Charles Oliveira before him. You know, he didn't really get anyone big name until he got the belt. But Tsarukyan versus Ismagulov, we were pretty excited for. I did say, like, disclaimer, Ismagulov, bit of a jab merchant. Not a finisher by any means, but he was on a double digits win streak. You know, he had a great fight with Kutateladze, which I felt like he could have lost. He certainly lost that first round that one of the judges gave him. But it was interesting. He's fought some good guys, and it was going to be very interesting to see him fight Arman Tsarukyan, because Arman Tsarukyan is in a weird place where he's still sort of unknown to a lot of people who only followed the big names, but he's also fought some of the big names. You know, he fought Makhachev on short notice, which means, you know, for Makhachev it was short notice, but also Arman Tsarukyan came in at short notice and fought Islam Makhachev, you know, and he gave him the fight of his career, minus the Mansour Barnaoui one. So he's a good measuring stick for Ismagulov, and yeah, I was talking about themes earlier. The boxing one is one we're going to come back to, but also the theme of just staying on offense seems to be, it's been a big secret for a while, not a big secret, but it's been a big part of MMA for a while. There was a little generation where counter fighters were doing amazingly. Lyoto Machida, Anderson Silva, people like that. There are still guys doing well as counter fighters who are allowing the opponent to come to them. But more and more in recent years, it's been the guys who go out and force their offense on the opponent and just don't let him get in a word in edgeways. And Arman Tsarukyan did a great job of that against Ismagulov, I felt. Ismagulov, while he does have the smothering grappling, he is more of a methodical, jabby sort of guy out in the open. He's not going to try and overwhelm you out in the open. He's going to try and just make your life very hard and outpoint you. And then, as we said, drop him for a takedown. Normally, when he's having a bit of trouble on the feet, I was very intrigued to see how Arman Tsarukyan's left kick would play out in this one, because he's always at a height and reach disadvantage in these fights. But he has a really lovely left high kick, which he can throw up straight from the stance, off a step or off a switch. Does them all beautifully. And he throws them. He leads with it and then throws hands afterwards, and he throws hands into it, which is really good. I think certainly in MMA, where we're only a few years removed from people being Muay Thai fighters and then coming out in shorts that are split up the side and just throwing overhands and low kicks. But I think with the focus on sort of the Dutch kickboxing tradition, guys get obsessed with punch, kick, with the idea being that punches put you in range to then throw a good hard low kick or whatever, or end with a high kick. And entering with kicks and punching off it is a really good idea. You've got to be able to do both. Use your punches to set up your kicks, and then your kicks to set up your punches. So he's doing really well, actually. He almost caught Ismagulov on the neck a few times with that left high kick, and he slots the left body kick underneath, because guys start reacting to the left high kick. Their right hand gets very high. It's a really lovely weapon for him, and what I love about it so much is it keeps the opponent's right hand at home a lot, which is one of the great advantages of throwing good round kicks anyway. If you throw him, not so much to the legs, but if you throw him to the head and body, guys start being reluctant to throw that hand, certainly on the open side. So if you're an orthodox fighter versus an orthodox fighter, throwing your left leg to the body and the head, and if you're a southpaw fighter versus an orthodox fighter, your left leg to the body and the head, you make it hard for them to feel comfortable pitching that right hand. And that works really nicely. And then if you ever want to try and counter the right hand, you just stop throwing that kick for a while. But he did a good job of mixing that up. His counter left hook was decent, even though Ismagulov had so much length and height on him. But mainly, it was the takedowns. He got a couple of single legs where he managed to raise the leg up on the outside, which is where the opponent wants. When you pick up a single leg, the starting point is normally pinching their leg between your thighs, and they'll try and get their leg to the outside of your body, and you want to try and get their leg to the inside of your body and lift it up as high as possible. Ismagulov got his leg to the outside of the body, and then Tsarukyan just lifted it up on the outside of his body and tripped the standing leg. Did that a couple of times. It was really nice. But really what I saw in this one, like, Tsarukyan was staying on top of him and, well, not physically on top of him because Ismagulov kept getting up, but he was sticking to him and working offensively. And one of the things that really impressed me about Ismagulov was how well he was able to turn his back to the turtle, or just when he was standing, and separate Tsarukyan's hands. Because personally, I have a lot of trouble separating hands when guys are in the back body lock on me, but he just did it instantly. And credit to Tsarukyan, because he'd immediately switch off to something else, like an outside trip, and then start attacking a double leg. It was really just the sort of flowing, always moving, always changing offense that you really love to see from Tsarukyan. And what made his fight with Makhachev so good, and what made his fight with Gamrot so good, was that he was constantly chaining stuff together. That Mushin, moving mind, or empty mind, just never getting fixated on one idea. Got mounted, actually, in round one, and Ismagulov grabbed the back of his head with one hand, like a collar tie from mount, and lifted up his elbow ready to strike on the other side. And Tsarukyan just caught the hand that was behind his own head so that Ismagulov couldn't post on it, and bridged and rolled him over. I mean, how often do you see an Upa work in MMA? An Upa is just bridging your hips, but making sure that the opponent's arm is trapped on that side. And normally, you have to trap the leg too, because otherwise they'll just post the leg. But Ismagulov was so obsessed with landing a good elbow that he just completely mistimed what he was doing and got bridged over. So things I liked: Tsarukyan's takedown attempts, Ismagulov's. I mean, the few jabs that Ismagulov got off were good. You can see why he has so much success with it. But Tsarukyan's use of his striking to shut down Ismagulov's jab. And then the other thing was that, as I said, Ismagulov tends to fall back on the takedown once he's having a bit of trouble on the feet. And he, against someone as good as Tsarukyan, he was really struggling to fall back on the takedown. Like, Tsarukyan wasn't giving up easy reactive doubles or anything like that. It was interesting, though, because Kutateladze had good success overwhelming Ismagulov in that first round. He just went after him confidently, stopped some takedowns, hit him with elbows and knees, and really hurt him. Tsarukyan didn't really hurt Ismagulov all that much, but he did stick to him and keep him on the defensive. And that seems to be like, if you're ever having trouble with someone, just make sure that you move first. That's going to be one of the themes today because, fuck it, we're going to jump all around this card. But Said Nurmagomedov versus Sadyukub Kagramanov. Kagramanov is a crazy guy, but he just ran out at Nurmagomedov and stuck to him and just kept the offense going. And you saw Nurmagomedov had horrible trouble. He didn't get anything going until the guillotine choke that won it. I mean, the guillotine choke he went for in the first round, he was like, oh, he's a tough guy, he toughed it out, but you could see it wasn't very good, the one that he jumped guard on. And then he kept looking for it too. He was standing almost in a back, but almost with Ramonov behind him. And he's throwing this guillotine, so he's like looking over his shoulder and throwing the guillotine around behind him so that he can turn back in, square his hips and grab his own hand. And it's something that Cub Swanson does a lot on the ground. But the problem is if you do it on the feet, the guy can move around and start, like, him moving around will start putting that police arm lock pressure, taking your arm up your back. And eventually you'll release it and he'll just go onto your back. Or he'll go onto your back with you in like a police arm lock over the top of him. But yeah, those standing reach over the top for guillotine positions, pretty dangerous. So Kakramanov stuck to him for the whole first round and much of the second round. And then he just ended up the same thing. So, I'm not going to say it's trash because it did work eventually, but Nurmagomedov was able to turn back into him and catch the guillotine and change it into a ninja choke. The ninja choke is so powerful. I've really fallen in love with it in recent years. There was a guy who did it in Shuto a couple of times back in the day, and I think he was the one that named it the ninja choke. But it's a front naked choke, basically. You do the full rear naked choke grip while on a guillotine. So it's not your wrist going into the Adam's apple, which is the very old school guillotine. It's your their Adam's apple, the front of their neck is in the V of your bicep and forearm. And then you've got the rear naked choke grip locked in too. And you'll see loads of guys finishing and attacking this too. Was it Condit versus Campman? I can't remember who won that one, but they picked up they used an ninja choke really well in that fight, being pushed against the fence. It's a great one, especially if your guy's going down low on your legs, and you can do sort of a bait. You can just let him drop into the crook of your arm by having your bicep against his head and acting like you want to dig an underhook, and they drop down on it going, no, you can't have the underhook, and then you just snap up the choke because they've dropped their neck onto the crook of your arm. But you'll see guys getting it from a few places now. It's also just a good place to go if you've got a traditional guillotine and you can punch it all the way through. Because kind of like the high elbow guillotine, the Marcellitine, it's another one with I don't want to say that leg position is irrelevant, but it is one where the guy can hop past your guard and you can still apply a good squeeze. Whereas the old school guillotine, it's like you've got to have your whole body in it, and the moment they hop past your guard, it's a liability holding on to it. But another great example, and I'm probably going to make a video about Mansour Barnoui versus Shamil Zavarov, because Zavarov's a pretty good fighter who fights, the familiar Dagestani style, and Mansour Barnoui had so much success against him on the ground. But Mansour Barnoui was, of course, looking for his tilt sweeps, gigglers, whatever you want to call them. And Zavarov would try and dig himself down, keep his weight over one side so that Mansour Barnoui couldn't tilt him. And Mansour Barnoui would start looking for ninja chokes from flat on his back because Zavarov was dropping his own head onto Barnoui's bicep. In fact, someone posted the submission stats for the UFC this year, and they had one Bravo choke on there. And that was just misrecorded because it was a power guillotine, front naked choke, ninja choke, whatever you want to call it, because the figure fouring of the arms makes you think it's a DAS, but then you look at it and the arm isn't in, it's just on the neck exclusively. But we talked about Nurmagomedov before, saying that he's the valor stealing Nurmagomedov, because he's not actually, but they're apparently family friends, but he's not related to the Nurmagomedovs of being amazing in the cage fame. But yeah, he's got Ali Abdulaziz as his manager, and he was off for a while, came back, won a fight by guillotine, and was like, everyone's ducking me. You're going, I'm not sure I believe that. You're not that great. And Kakramanov, didn't duck him, came in, put it on him, jumped into a guillotine. Oh, yeah, that's another one. Arnold Allen versus Mads Bennell. Another one where Mads Bennell was just all over him with boxing and takedowns, but just dropped his head into Allen's bicep, and Allen snatched it up real quick, finished him. So yeah, I like Kakramanov, and I like Nurmagomedov, to be honest. I like anyone who does weird guillotines and looks for them over their own back, but it is... One of the reasons it's weird is because it can get you in trouble. So, rest of this card. Main event, Jared Cannonier versus Sean Strickland. Not going to talk about that at length because it just sort of blurred to one for me. It was Sean Strickland reaching for Cannonier's jabs and throwing jabs back. Cannonier going southpaw occasionally and throwing like a right hook, left straight. The thing that annoyed me so much about this fight, and I get to talk about another one while talking about it, Caceres versus Julian Erosa. If you have someone reaching for your punches, go southpaw, throw a left straight and a left high kick immediately after it. Anyone who does... Because this is the thing. Not everyone has the height and reach of Alex Pereira. They're not going to be able to leap in and just hit him with a left hook on the chin. But that reaching leaves him out of position constantly, and he's squared up and his head's up in the air. He's completely available. So throw the left straight and throw the left kick immediately after it. Guys should be doing that constantly against Sean Strickland. They should be keeping his fucking right hand at home because he's not even punching with it. It's not a threat. It's just reaching out and being a liability for him. Instead, they focus on punching his palm and letting him parry their punches. Cannonier's low kicks work pretty well, given that I said they might not because Sean Strickland's always on one leg anyway. But yeah, it was just a garbage fight, and both of them thought they won. I thought they both lost, to be honest, but would happily never watch either of them again. Amir Albazi got his knockout in the third round. I thought Costa did a better job lasting there than expected because Albazi's pretty decent and Costa was unknown. He came in at short notice for this one. Caceres versus Julian Erosa I just mentioned, but man, it's hard being a Juicy J fan. He's so good in some respects, but he's also... There's elements of his style that you're just going, why? Why do you fight like that? Why do you... Well, he wasn't super aggressive in this one, but the hands down all the time, So he slipped Caceres' left hand and thought he was miles out of range, and Caceres clearly planned it because he threw the left hand and immediately got on one leg and threw the kick. Beautiful read by Caceres. Julian Erosa, you got to tighten up that defense, mate, because this is the thing. If you're not going to have a guard, you got to move. You got to use your head you got to use distancing and move your head. But if you shackle yourself to just doing that, it's very easy for someone to throw a fake at you or a feint, have you lean and kick you in the head because it's unguarded. Even guys who don't like using their hands as a guard have got to use their hands as a guard sometimes, especially against round kicks, because unless you're pulling away from them, you get the distance right. You've got to be able to take them. Very sad for me as an Erosa fan and as a Caceres hater, but actually, if Alex Caceres wants to start finishing people and looking pretty decent in the fights, I'm all up for it. It's just that fight with Yair Rodriguez was peak bad MMA for me. They went for 25 minutes and they threw 300 spins between them. Didn't come close to hitting either of them, any number of times. Great fight. Drew Dober versus Bobby Green. Probably what everyone wants to hear about today. Man, Bobby Green, he's on a couple of losses now, but this is probably the best I've seen him look ever. And I said that, going back to Fiziev. And I said in this one, powerful round kicks should be the thing that gives him difficulty because he relies on slipping punches so much. They should be able to stand him up with the powerful round kicks. He fought Fiziev, one of the best round kickers in the division and maybe MMA. And he fought Drew Dober, who loves a good round kick. And neither of them did the round kick even bother him a little bit. He brought his activity up right away. He does have the most strikes recorded in UFC history or something at this point, and they keep saying he's had an amazing output for years, but I don't think he has. I remember watching him in fights, and he's just shaking, waving off punches and not doing anything in response. So he's fighting southpaw for the majority of this against Drew Dober, also a southpaw, and he's throwing left-hand leads, which is like two orthodox fighters fighting and one of them just leading with right-hand straights. It shouldn't work. And Drew Dober is clearly aware that it shouldn't work, but Drew Dober's shoulder isn't there. Drew Dober isn't reacting to them. Drew Dober doesn't have a lead hand up. He's not occupying the line of that left straight. So he's getting hit with a punch where, his response is, you shouldn't be hitting me with that. and he doesn't have an answer for it. Bobby Green kept throwing the left straight and sort of stepping up and then throwing a right straight from feet level. This is that MMA boxing stuff that I'm going to get into, like just weird positions where guys are on top of their own feet or their feet are level, and you just don't see it that much in good boxing. Really liked the way that Bobby Green was using front kicks to the body, just short, poking him in there as Drew Dober was trying to keep applying the pressure. Dober was trying to take three to land one, and while it ultimately worked in the end, he was really the teeps, especially when you got a guy just trying to move forward through the strikes. Front kicks to the body just fold him in half, and they're so tiring. The more aggressive an opponent is, the better front kicks to the body work as a tiring weapon. But round one was all Bobby Green. Never seen Drew Dober get beat up like that on the feet. Went back to his corner, was like, I'll do better in the next round, and just came in forward and tried to, eat the punches, bite down on his mouthpiece and get into range again. Was backing him up to the fence. This is going to be a theme today. Bobby Green going feet level on the fence, shoulder rolling stuff off, punching back in between. Now, you'll know that my favourite boxer of all time is Jersey Joe Walcott. One of the things I loved about Jersey Joe Walcott was his ability to fight off the ropes by going feet level, rolling down behind his shoulders and shooting short, straight punches, mainly from the arm, as the breaks in his opponent's punches came, or in the aftermath of big swings. However, the most famous loss on my boy's record was against Rocky Marciano. He did, 12 rounds of going back to the ropes like that, and in the 13th round, so wouldn't even happen today, but 13th round, he gets caught there. And that's the thing. You are putting yourself in a mechanically bad position. You're leaving your stance. You're making your punches weaker. You can't punch as hard if you don't have a stance. You can't take punches as well if you don't have a stance, because your feet aren't going to catch you. And you're making yourself a more ready target. It's a impressive skill to get down behind your shoulders like that and snipe off the cage or the ropes. But at some point, you should be using that to turn the opponent around, because you run the risk of a big connection. And that's not me saying like Bobby Green should have never gone there and never done this. It's just, this is the risk here. He landed a couple of good pop shots as Dober was trying to get in on him, and then Dober just caught him with a huge overhand, caught him right behind the head, and slumped him, because that's the danger of standing with your back to the boundary, especially with a cage, because it's solid. It's not ropes that you can swing back and forth in. Brilliant fight, amazing showing from Bobby Green, amazing showing of guts from Drew Dober. It's not the kind of performance that you want to go, yeah, that's how good a fighter I am from, but it is the kind of performance that tells you a lot about someone when they can just overcome that horrible technique and speed disadvantage and get through it. Because fighting isn't all speed and technique, and it isn't all which punch will get there first. Let's move on now again to Jake Matthews versus Matt Semilsberger. Don't rate either of these guys too highly as strikers. Semilsberger got beat up by Morono. Jake Matthews, while he did just knock out Andre Fialho, who was on the end of a 3-1 year, Andre Fialho had been in camp all year, as we've talked about before. He'd been beat up in his last one as well. He'd been chinned a few times, and his defense is dog shit. Jake Matthews, I think they reinvented him as a striker, and he told them that he'd always been a striker, so people were like, oh damn, Jake Matthews has always been this kind of fighter. Jake Matthews made Sean Brady's boxing, which is consensus garbage, look amazing. That Sean Brady fight, everyone went, oh my god, Sean Brady's got everything, he's going to run through this division, and then he got boxed up by Michael Chiesa in his next one. But yeah, this was Jake Matthews going backwards and trying to land good counter left hooks, and then forgetting that the man might have thrown the punch, or the punch might still be coming after the left hook. So he's throwing these left hooks, backing onto the fence with his head up in the air. He's landed them. I mean, he hurt Semilsberger with one of them in the first round, but then he's getting hit with the right hand immediately afterwards, and he got dropped in both the second and the third round off this. Meanwhile, Semilsberger's plan was to feint Matthews towards the fence, and then hit him when he was stood almost square with his head up in the air and no guard. The first one was a fake jab, fake body jab, overhand across the top, but I don't think he jabbed much for real. He just worked him back with feints, and that's one of the great strengths about feints. You don't have to show any, you don't have to give the opponent anything if they're reacting, and you can move them back every time, and eventually they'll run out of space. And then I'd much rather step in with a committed 1-1-2 along the fence than I would out in the open. Like I said, don't really rate either man too highly, but they are, they have fun fights. Matthews, I believe he's got a contract negotiation coming up because he's gone full UFC pay defending guy on Twitter. I hope he gets paid, but yeah, it was a weird little resurgence he had there based off being Andre Filio's 5th opponent of the year and finally cracking his chin. Was there anything else on this card that was worth noting? Oh, Alexijuk knocked out Brundage with hammer fists and punches from closed guard. When's the last time you saw that? Very weird, because Brundage got him, stuck to him early, dominated him along the fence, got the back body lock, sat him down with the broomstick where you put your leg across the front of one of their legs and into the back of their other knee, and you just lever him down. You sit down with him. So he's on his back, and then Alexijuk just did the classic Anthony Pettis, whip the arm over the head and turn back into them so you're in closed guard, and then he just beat him up from there. And really, if you're a grappler of any ability, regardless of if you come from a wrestling background or not, you should be able to tie up or get up or, kick the guy out. You can't just sit in closed guard being like, I'm safe because I'm in closed guard, and getting beat up. Rafa Garcia versus Mahashate was decent fun. Mahashate, I really like how much he uses his elbows and knees for such a long man. He relies a lot on his... is he southpaw, left straight? His rear hand straight he relies on a lot. But where the elbow and the knee are seen as short-range weapons, being a long man, you can get to them a little bit easier. Also, the guy is going to be wanting to overcompensate for your length and run in on you. So his elbows and knees were really good, but Garcia just kept getting through him. He got badly cut behind the ear with one of them, and it was bleeding everywhere, but he kept taking these and just jumping in and getting takedowns. Much like one of the takedowns in that co-main event, Ismagulov lost patience and stopped jabbing and just jumped him with a knee and got taken down. Brian Battle versus Renat Fakred. See, this is the thing. This was the night that company men got their asses kicked. If you're a company man, the UFC, if you're a very bad fighter like Sam Alvey, the UFC will do you a favor by keeping you around and letting you get knocked out over and over again. But doesn't really benefit you to simp for fighter pay that much. Brian Battle was simping for fighter pay very recently, and they gave him this largely unknown, but also known to be a badass, Renat Fakhretdinov, who just mauled him, just got all over him. Brian Battle's hands have always been very sloppy, but his kicks have always been very good. But the problem is, the kicking is the thing that opens you up most to being easily bundled over. So everything in his game played badly into Fakhretdinov's game. However, he did avoid a lot of damage from the bottom. He played guard, but he was playing guard along the fence, and this is a theme we constantly say, but the commentators were hammering it home too. You cannot, the occasion when you submit someone with your head pressed against the fence is going to be a very extreme anomaly. Guard requires you to have space around you to move in. If you're against the fence, you've got two options. The one that everyone is doing, wall walk, or the one that people are slowly working out is actually probably quite a good idea against people who are very good at stopping the wall walk, turn yourself off the fence. Battle did neither of those. But I think the thing that let him down the most, I quite liked he kept going over Fakhretdinov's head with his arm like he was headlocking him, and then he'd go under the far armpit, and then he'd straighten his arm out. And it was working quite well, and you could see he'd been working on it a lot because it was annoying Fakhretdinov. And then Fakhretdinov ducked under his armpit and hit him in the head, and it was like, oh, my training partners didn't do that to me. But the thing that I was kind of a letdown in this one, I think Battle would have had a good chance at winning this on the scorecards if he'd just been elbowing. It's the one strike from your back that actually does some damage. Fakhretdinov was not really landing that effectively. He was in close guard for a lot of the fight. Had Battle been properly going for it with overhead elbows, pushing Fakhretdinov's face away and dropping him onto elbows, he could have cut him up. And that really does play well with the judges, especially when it's quite clear that the other guy's not hurting you. Though he did drop Battle in the third round because Battle just sort of lumbered up to him and threw a very slow kick. But yeah, I've got my eye on Fakhretdinov in the future. Brian Battle, honestly, I think he could have done... he doesn't have the skills to wrestle up from under this guy, I don't think. But I think he could have done better with his current skill set if he'd just been striking. And this is the thing, it's easy to get drawn into striking too much from the bottom. But if you strike too little, you're denying yourself the openings to get up that would be created by striking, and there is damage that can be done from there. If you watch Michael Bisping versus George St. Pierre, Tony Ferguson, any one of the fights where he was on the bottom, Brian Ortega versus Tavares is a great one for those framing elbows, just using your body rigid, hands on their face, straighten your legs, push them out so they're driving their head into you, and then you just drop them onto the elbow. Because there's more damage you can do. You'll get more impact out of that than anything you can do by moving your own arms. Morozov versus Newson was all right. Newson's got quite a frustrating style. He's got weird sort of janky American karate techniques that don't really flow well together. Ended up getting taken down a lot. And Cup versus Dvorak was annoying because of Keith Peterson, mainly. Someone sent me a clip of this, the first thing after it happened, say, like, Keith Peterson just Toyoni'd Dvorak. And there's a clip of Dvorak. He'd been hurt and he was trying to run out, and he ran straight into Keith Peterson and immediately got dropped by Cup after that. But then I watched the fight and it was happening constantly to both of them. Even in the third round when Dvorak turned Cup onto the cage and Cup tried to circle out, and he wasn't running, he was just circling out. Keith Peterson's just there and he runs into him. And it made me think, like, this and a clip of a Muay Thai ref. Oh, no, it wasn't Muay Thai ref. I think it was some Malaysian MMA promotion. It's on my Twitter. I retweeted it. But some guy getting, like, hanging in the ropes like Griffith versus Perrette. Thank you, Carl McLaughlin, for the reference there. But, yeah, he takes about 11 unanswered punches just hanging in the ropes before the ref gets to them, because the ref's on the other side of the ring. He sees it happen, but he's walking around in the opposite corner. Kind of like Herb Dean always does. So he has to sprint up to the fighters, and then he gets really close so that they think the fight's going to be called. And he goes, nope, I didn't call the fight, so you have to keep going. Yeah, but it just... last week, maybe it was 2 weeks ago, Mills Lane died. And Mills Lane was really good, because he was an ex-boxer, and he was a judge, I think, or like a lawyer or something like that. But he reffed some important fight. And he reffed the very famous Tyson-Holyfield ear-biting fight. But in that fight, especially in any of the other ones, you can see the two fighters are facing each other. He's facing the space between the fighters, and he's moving sideways like you would in a fucking athletic stance. He's close enough. He's never too close. If he feels like they're getting close to him, he circles out. Whereas every referee in MMA is walking around the opposite side of the ring, crossing their feet over each other, miles away from the action. Mills Lane was fucking on it. I might make a little video about him this week, because it's such a stark contrast to how shitty the reffing position is in almost all MMA. It's just dudes waltzing around the ring on the opposite side and then going, oh, what's that? Oh, I better get in there. And then having to run 20 feet. You did a 40-yard dash across the fucking octagon. But I thought Cap looked good in this one. He's been very frustrating in the past because he doesn't really let his hands go enough. David Dvorak was really frustrating in this one because he just sort of ran. He was trying to do, it reminded me a lot of, there's a guy called Phil Norman who's got a system called Ghost, which is like his boxing style where you sort of run away and throw punches at the same time. I never looked into it much. I need to actually sit down and watch some of his content. But if you watch any of the advertising content for it, it's like this running and throwing huge overhands as you sprint away. But Cap did decently. He stayed patient. He got taken down in round one, ended up on the bottom. Was that off the back elbow? He got taken down, but he ended up in half guard with the Kimura, and I love the Kimura from half guard because you're very rarely going to tear it out if you're fighting someone good who's alert, but you can threaten other things. You can threaten to put the butterfly hook in and sweep. You can threaten to use the knee shield to turn to the turtle and stand up. Roger Gracie had some fantastic sweeps off there, just like a hip bump sweep, and the famous one where he goes over his own head. If you watch him rolling with GSP, he does that to GSP in their no-gi session. You can start stepping over for arm bars if you can move their face out of the way, a la Lachlan Giles versus Wagner Rocha back in the day, before Rocha got massive. Side note, the no-gi worlds happened the other day, and 4 of the finalists didn't turn up. They got to the final, and apparently, this is the story, there were 6 seats by the mats marked USADA that were empty all day, and then they rocked up just before the finals. And 4 guys left. But apparently, the whole place, just people were running. Draw your own conclusions about that. But 4 dudes who, Cyborg Abreu, the no-gi worlds has been his life. for years. And it's one thing to, like, how could you make it like, oh, winning the the Nogi Worlds is the biggest achievement of my life. It's so important to me. And then be like, but I couldn't make the finals. I had a flight. Just doesn't add up, does it? But Wagner Rocha was one of those. Anyway, so the Kimura, it lets you get into a lot of things. We talk a lot about how Juliana Pena, before she got her boxing going and just boxed the ears off Amanda Nunes in their first fight, she used the Kimura really well. She got dropped and she used the Kimura really well to tie up Amanda Nunes, because if you can never really let your other arm get too far away from the arm that's being attacked. You can hold the inside of your thigh, but then the guy can start peeling it out. And that's what happened here. Dvorak just got carried away trying to work offensively, and Cup just peeled it out, put it up his back. Dvorak had to roll, and it got very close to a finish. And classy Manal Cape, he's not a fighter I would call classy that often, but until the moment the buzzer, the horn went, he was trying to break that arm, because he knew, this is the chance, I better get it done now, or at least he goes into the next round with a broken arm. And the second that Claxon went, he did the Fedor thing. He let go of it and he put the guy's arm back in a comfortable position and then walked off. It was very cool to see. But Dvorak, he just shook it off. It's one of those things, like, you never know when something's going to break, and then sometimes things just go further than they should, and you're like, oh, what's been done? Oh, it's just a bit bruised. I have no idea why, but that's just sometimes what happens. So Dvorak actually looked fine going into the second round, and then Cup stepped it up a bit on the feet and beat him up a bit. It was good. It was a good performance from Cup. He's come a little way since he got beat up by Kyoji Horiguchi. Meanwhile, Kyoji Horiguchi's declined a fair amount, but we're going to be dealing with him next week because we got the big Bellator versus Ryzen event, which is kind of like the Globetrotters versus the Generals if they co-promoted, is what I said on Twitter. The Ryzen champions, you're just like, who the fuck is that? I mean, I know who Satoshi is, but some of these guys, whoever Orhan Archuleta is fighting, you're going, oh, not a great fighter. Actually, I suppose, is Patchy Mix? I don't think Patchy Mix is on that card, but I meant to mention Patchy Mix because he got he fought Magomedov, who's a very good Dagestani grappler, and he managed to get the guillotine traps working. We always talk about Dustin Poirier, don't be silly, jump the gilly, but he actually used the guillotine really well because he was able to use the momentum to turn Magomedov over and then come up on top and threaten to come up on top. And I think he actually got his guillotine finish from coming up on top. He was never jumping to the bottom. He was always sitting down momentarily to tilt the guy over. And he wasn't doing it along the cage either. He was making the guy take shots out in the open. But yeah, that's about it for those fights. They weren't great. Just seeing off the year for the UFC. Certain number of events to do, certain number of fights have to be done. Got to, keep the content churning out, which is why they're now doing Power Slap. They're advertising that everywhere. It's fucking pathetic. But I think we'll do a couple of questions before we get out of here for this week, and then we'll do Rising stuff, either Boycast or next week, and then we'll get into Slackies. I'm going to be asking for your Slacky nominations soon, so keep an eye on the old Twitter and Facebook. Let's do a couple of quick questions. A surprising number of people emailed in to say the pronunciation of Melbourne, because I was saying Melbourne breakfast. Nicholas says, Slacky, I love your work, but please do not pronounce it Melbourne like some Yank. The correct pronunciation is Melbourne. On a side note, T2T was originally founded in Melbourne. Melbourne, there we go. Thanks in advance from Nick. Elliot says, hey mate, enjoy the podcast all the way from the Antipodes. Thought I'd give you a heads up on the pronunciation of Melbourne, as in Melbourne breakfast. Didn't know T2 was in the UK, by the way. They started off in Melbourne. My fave brew from them is the French Earl Grey, which you've mentioned. Would be curious. I'm not advertising for these people. This is just a drink I've had for like 3 podcasts. Would be curious to know if you enjoy digestives with your cup. I do. Anyway, I digress. The city of Melbourne, Americans tend to pronounce it Melbourne or Melbourne. Think Jason. Melbourne. Think Jason, which is what you're going with at the moment. Any Aussies who listen to the show will shudder if they hear that. For the authentic pronunciation, go with Melbourne, with the B-U-N, Melbourne, as the one word with no break after the L. Melbourne. Melbourne. Had a bit of an Asperger's attack the other day listening to the show, lol, and eventually got some time to write in. Keep up the good work. Happy holidays and all that from Elliot. Thank you, Elliot. And thank you, Nick. I think I had a couple on the Patreon too, saying Melbourne. There we go. Hi, Jack. I've got a couple of Zhang Weili related questions. She seems to be big. She's doing well. Certainly with international appeal. Hi, Jack. I am a female Muay Thai fighter who fights at 135 pounds or 61 kilos. And I had the unique opportunity to train with John Yodpech, who happens to be the longtime striking coach of Zhang Weili. He taught me this combination if I had the opponent near the ropes, where I throw a lead uppercut. Yes, lead uppercut to right elbow. What are your thoughts on this combination and what are ways to build off it? P.S. I thought you might enjoy this picture of Weili and I after her fight. She was explaining to me and another Muay Thai hobbyist how she cut the cage on Carla by stepping laterally and making sure not to follow Carla around. I thought you might like this story, even though it's not related to my question, from Sherman. Thank you, Sherman. I did like this story and the picture. Literally, sweaty hair, holding the belt in a hotel room. Lead uppercut to right elbow. That's an interesting one, because when we say lead uppercut, the problem with all the language we use is that it can be multiple things. Lead can be leading with, as in attacking with. Lead can be lead hand, as in, for an orthodox fighter, your left hand. So when we say never, ever, ever lead with an uppercut, typically we're talking about the rear-handed uppercut thrown as a lead, thrown first. The lead hand uppercut is a little bit rarer. You don't see it very much for reasons we talked about before, but there's sort of two ways you can throw it. You can throw it long as a sort of scooping up jabbing sort of blow, and then it loses a bit of its power, or you can throw it up like an uppercut, but then you sort of have to square your stance and get in on top of the opponent. So if you crowd someone to the fence, say you're checking their hands, or you come in checking their hands and you come in behind a raised knee like a fake teep, and then you land, then the full-on from below lead hand, square shoulders, rip their head off uppercut into a right elbow would work really nicely. Typically when you're trying to set up right hand strikes off a lead uppercut, you throw it in the sort of up jabbing way. Think of, Conor McGregor, Max Holloway, or the Prince Naseem special. He really loved that long lancing. He called it a corkscrew uppercut, but because it wasn't really an uppercut, it didn't go up. Well, it did go up. It was a rising punch rather than going up at the ceiling. It was going sort of airplane taking off. And those are the ones that you get in with good punches afterwards. The thing about the elbow is that it's quite a short-range strike, so you could do it off a shorter uppercut, a more direct uppercut, the more pure uppercut. If you can get in position to land a left uppercut to right elbow, the two weapons are pretty similar range. If we're talking like a classic slashing right elbow or a Muay Thai punching sort of right elbow, might look into trying to enter off the right hand against your opponent's guard and square your feet as you do so, and that's a good chance to land either the left uppercut up the middle or the left hook around the opponent's elbow to the body, or the left uppercut inside the opponent's elbow to the body. That's a nice little triple attack sort of follow-up to a right straight where you step with your right foot as well. Not into a southpaw stance, but just to square your feet, because squaring your feet really opens up the path for that left uppercut. So that's not really adding on to it. That's more putting something on the front of it. Another one I always liked, a great example of this is Fedor versus Fujita. If you step in with a round kick, doesn't matter if it's left or right, put both hands on the opponent, so check their arms or push their shoulders away, push them back into the ropes, and put your feet down so that they're square, and then start swinging. I really liked that, so that would be a good setup to get you in position to left uppercut as well. Follow-ups from the right elbow are a little bit tricky anyway, because you've done all the work to get close, and really elbows happen when you're closing to a clinch or when you're coming out of a clinch. So if you throw in the left uppercut and you throw the right elbow, probably best to just tie up off that. If you do it somehow exiting a clinch, so someone's trying to grab a hold of you and you go left uppercut, right elbow, then you could push out of the clinch and start kicking again. It's tricky, but I do like the left uppercut as a setup to right punches. The left uppercut to right straight is obviously an obvious one. You just love lifting people's heads up into the path of the right straight. Left uppercut into overhand, overhand into left uppercut, both work beautifully. It's what's sometimes called a C-cut. Matthew Saad Mohammed had a great knockout like that. Rory McDonald did it to Tarek Safadine. Alex Pereira did a ton of them against Simon Marcus because he kept ducking in. But Gennady Golovkin has a really nice one where he gets head-to-head with the opponent, almost forehead to forehead, throws a big left uppercut up the middle, and then lowers his level as he's raising his opponent's head, and throws a wide right to the body. Really loved that. But yeah, I feel like the left uppercut for an orthodox fighter is kind of an unexplored punch. Really more for in-fighting, close-range stuff. But if you can, certainly in Muay Thai, if you can break from clinches fairly effectively, I can see you building infighting combinations off it. It's the breaking the opponent's grips or learning which grips you can disregard. Because if someone throws their hand behind your head or their arms around you pretty limply, you can keep boxing them. You can keep punching them. It's learning what you need to respect and what you don't. I mean, it's the same as fucking BJJ or judo or whatever. Learn which grips you can disregard. But that's an experience thing. So the second question I've got here about Zhang is from Gabe. Oi oi, Jackie boy of the Savaloy. As a BJJ blue belt looking for techniques, I found this crucifix breakdown from Zhang Weili and her breaking down the crucifix system. She said her main entry into the reverse crucifix, as in crucifix on the back of someone as opposed to mounted crucifix, which really you don't see in grappling all that much, was when Carla goes for the single. So I go to class and I try her system on white belts as one higher belt does. However, I ran into the problem of my training partner just bridging into the position and was able to free the arm trap between my legs. Do you have a solution for this? For reference, here is the video I'm talking about on Instagram of Zhang breaking down the crucifix system she learned from Josh Hinger, from your boy Gabe. Yeah, go look this up because it's good. It's a good little demonstration of sort of the options she was going to go through, because the sprawling on the single and Carla trying to work her way through that single from her knees was going to be part of the game. That was going to be something that they'd encountered. Not the single, the high crotch. And we talked about this when the fight happened. Shooting with your head on the outside, converting that into a crucifix is a nice move, but the crucifix can be a bit of a pain in the ass. You got people like Ben Askren used to do the funk, or Joseph Benavidez used to do the funk escape from the bottom of side control, which basically takes you into the crucifix. Because if you finish a lot of high crotches, the crucifix isn't, you're not that scared of the position. You just turn towards their heads, you turn towards their legs, and you slip an arm free, or you hand fight until you get an arm free. But with the crucifix, a guy to really watch was Barrett Yoshida. Back in the day, he did amazing stuff with the crucifix. He was basically the last guy using it for a long time. It's sort of come back into vogue in recent years, but it was big back in the day when nobody really knew any jiu-jitsu. People would show the crucifix. They had Hickson Gracie on one of those martial arts breakdowny sports science programs, and he showed the crucifix with the neck crank and everything, which is really old school. And dudes won't sit there and let you do that to them. But Barrett Yoshida was doing a great job of, he also sort of pioneered snapping people down from the seated guard, which you see the Danaher crew do all the time. Gordon Ryan, it's his main go-to. If guys meet him in his guard and they stay on their knees, he puts a hand on the mat, he puts a hand behind their head, and he gets up. And, in the course of getting up, he snaps their head down underneath his chest. And Barrett Yoshida used to do that, drag people forward, start working his legs into the crucifix. One of the important things with the crucifix typically is that you want to get the hand, the leg that's nearer their head wants to be draped over their arm. Because if you're controlling with one leg, that tends to be easier. That guys don't limp their arm out as easily. It also frees you up to swing the other leg under their back when they bridge onto you, so that you can take a back control with an arm trapped, which is really nice. Gary Tonin used to do that quite a lot. I can't remember which match he did that in, but that was a big thing. I think definitely look for Barrett Yoshida. There's a couple of breakdowns on him. I think Gambledub did one back in the day. He was really good on YouTube. And it tends to be, a lot of it tends to be about learning which leg needs to be, well, not needs to be on top, where the weaknesses are when each leg is on top. Personally, I like to have the leg that's on the side of the opponent's, that's nearer to the opponent's head, the one that's controlling the arm, and then the other leg be free-ish. The other thing that you can really use well is like, guys get caught up looking for the choke, and then you're controlling one hand with your hand and the other of their hands between your leg. If you just go to a Kimura grip on the arm, you don't have the threat of the choke, but you can always just use the Kimura grip when they try and turn into you to push them off or to chase their back in sort of a Kimura trap sort of way. So learn which leg needs to be on top. Go watch some Barrett Yoshida videos / entries, studies. And remember that the Kimura grip is a great bailout. Because when the guy's coming on top of you, you can feel like, oh my God, I've lost this. But a Kimura grip is like a really nice lifeline, because as they're coming on top of you, you can still run to their back. Or go for an armbar or something like that. Not the best medium for me to do this. I should have done this in an article. But yeah, the crucifix is, not going to say my baby. It's something I liked for a while. Something I haven't worked on in quite a bit. But when I did like it, no one else really did. It was just Barrett Yoshida, and that was about it. Whereas now you got people like Gordon Ryan using the crucifix fairly regularly. It was awesome to see her apply that so well in that fight, though. And it was Hinger that gave her the idea. Really nice, because what we're often talking about, particularly with like the Kimura grip and stuff, is trying to turn wrestling exchanges into submission threats. That is a great way to throw off people who have very good wrestling. And the Kimura grip's a great way to do that, and the crucifix is a great way to do that. Because they're moves that you don't have to worry about in traditional wrestling. Anyway, I reckon that'll do us for today. I'll be back sometime. If I'm not back before Christmas, have a great one. I'll be back in the days after Christmas. And then we've got a good Bellator versus Rising card coming up. And then we're into the new year. So we'll do Bellator versus Rising, then we'll do the Slackies, and we'll just run on from there. If you want to get in on the extra stuff, read all the articles, get the boycasts, sign up to the Patreon, and support the podcast. If you want to send an email to the podcast, jackslackpodcast@gmail.com. And if you want to see what I'm writing anytime, fightprimer.com. I am your boy, Jack Slack. Never watching another Sean Strickland headliner again. Bless.